This is the podcast between an old-school mentor and a digital mentee on managing and/or working with people, navigating a career, growing profits, and not killing your coworkers along the way. Now let's join the consultant, Hayden Shaw, and the millennial who fixes Hayden's iPhone, Seth Tower Hurd.
Consultant and the Millennial, episode 23, take 7, because the first 6 takes, Hayden and I both tried to talk at the exact same time, which is sort of probably how it feels when a team gets stuck. You're all trying to talk at the same time and nothing's getting done, which is going to be the episode here in a moment.
This is why you were the tower, because I cannot believe you could turn that into an introduction to our topic. You really are smooth, Carlos Santana. You really are smooth.
Well, I appreciate your 1998 reference, although our younger listeners are not going to get that at all. It was a terrible pop song that I don't want you to go listen to. By the way, Amanda, my wife who edits these episodes, scolded me for scolding you. She's like, you scold Hayden a lot. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you're always telling him to either not move around because he's out of the frame of the video, or he needs to not move around because he keeps getting off of his microphone. And I was like, well, that's because he's doing those things.
No, that scolding. That would all right. We always say we'll do an episode on that, and then we're like, well, what are we going to do the episode on next? So
what's that episode? I'm writing it down. What's that episode?
Feedback. We'll write down feedback, and I deserve to be scolded for screwing up both sound and video. So I completely concur with you. And but I thought you did a great intro to team. It was smooth. I'm sorry you didn't like that Grammy-winning Carlos Santana collaboration disc. And let's move forward.
Okay, it's more just the singer on it as opposed to Carlos Santana himself. Rob Thomas of a band called Matchbox 20s was one of the most painful things about junior high. And junior high is rough.
That is tweetable right there. If anybody's tweeting stuff out, that is the tweetable.
Do we do trigger warnings on this show? Are we going to act like we're like whiny little college students or not?
No, that's even better there. I just meant tweet. You could tweet it out. Okay. But yeah, trigger warning is even better. If you're a Matchbox 20 fan and had a crush in junior high on Rob, then yes, you probably should be triggered.
No, I meant that you have to say trigger warning before you say Matchbox 20, so I can go curl up in a corner in the fetal position.
All right. That's a whole nother second episode. Why Seth is more frustrated with the millennials than Hayden is. That'll be in the consultant and the millennial. Why Seth is more frustrated with millennials than Hayden.
That is a good topic. But we got to do two. I've got both of those. I got them both too.
Write down our future topics like I always think I should, but never do. Let's go.
Okay, so why teams get stuck? I think this is one of the single most frustrating elements of work, period. I would say I am more worn out and more likely when I was, not working for myself to go look for another job when the team wasn't getting things done than when things were really stressful because there was a big project due, because I was inspired by that in some ways if I believed in what we were doing. But if the team's just sitting there and doing nothing, I just want to put my head inside my file cabinet and slam it 37,000 times.
That's just too great. Too great of an analogy.
Yeah, and if I can set that up a bit more, because obviously you're still writing. The thing is that we're so quick, at least the teams I've been a part of, to attribute it to the personality of the organization, the culture of the organization, that'd be another way to put it, or to attribute it to individuals within, kind of the social structure. Oh my gosh, well, if blah, blah, blah would just get out of my way, then, we could get this project done, which is probably true in the micro, but in the long term, being mad at someone because they're dumb is not necessarily a strategy for getting things moving again. And I hate to tell it to you, but now that I work for myself, there's still a few people I interact with that I can't stand. I mean, there's no getting around difficult people and just saying, well, if only there weren't difficult people, we could get work done. There's always difficult people. Teams do get stuck. So what do we do?
You introduced it really well. I am still thinking about the wonderful analogy, or not even an analogy, just the actual calling of I want to smash my head in the filing cabinet repeatedly. And so we don't advise that. If we need to give, I know it's delayed, but we want to give you a trigger warning about violent metaphors and involving head smashing and office equipment. So the reason it's on my mind is I was working with a group today in a famous company. Here's my rule of thumb. You probably have discovered this. I don't use names if it's a negative example. I use names if it's a positive example. You know, I figure if you hire me and I find out things that are negative, then you don't need any additional publicity. Unless you're violating the law, then I would go to authorities and not make you public, even with another client or something else. But if you're doing great stuff, people ought to know about it. And so I was working this week with literally a world famous company. Tom Peters talked about him. A number of other writers have talked about him. I've been a fan. First time I ever got to work with them. And they truly are as luscious as people say they are. And like anybody else on the planet, teams get stuck. So that's what we were really talking about, is how to help teams get unstuck. And everybody, I really like that old quotation from Tolstoy, where he said, happy families are all the same, but unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. And the research shows actually he was wrong, and that is unhappy families are all the same, and happy families are happy in their own individual way. But that may be another episode. Anyway, the thing is with teams, we get to the stuck places in different ways, but we all get to the same stuck places, and what we do may have some variations depending on your culture and your values and your leaders and how things roll. But we are going to make through the same thresholds. So understanding where teams get stuck, I think, becomes, I've learned through the years, it becomes one of the 3 or 4 things I think that help people, no matter what level you are in the organization, to just be better at work, or to not hate what you do as much, or as one of the taglines for the show, to reduce the amount of homicidal fantasies you have of other people you work with.
Marketing management, not killing people along the way, killing your coworkers along the way. I actually do think, Hayden, we need to split this episode and maybe this is one episode, but let's talk about this topic 2 different ways. The first one is being stuck when things are just clicking along. I would say that the second one that we need to address, because you're such an expert on this, is being stuck when the organization is in the middle of change management, when there's a big thing that's happened.
I think that's both of those are great. Okay. Yeah, let's focus on getting stuck when, matter of fact, Seth, let's start from the beginning. Let's say you got a brand new team.
Yeah.
You got a brand new team, and it goes through some predictable phases. So back in the 50s, form, storm, norm, perform. Now, it's also like one of those Matchbox 20 Carlos Santana things where your generation may not remember this. And form, storm, norm, perform was so ubiquitous until about 10 years ago that now I'll have to ask, and half the room, people who are younger are like, I've never heard about that. And it is, an oldie, but not an oldie moldy. This one's an oldie, but a goodie. And I had a guy say to me, I'm out working in the yard with my son, and he's got his headphones on. I said, put it on Bluetooth. I bought a Bluetooth speaker. And he's got the 60s station on Pandora, and his dad's like, what are you doing? He goes, I really like Bob Dylan. And his dad said, yeah, so do I. Some things sound really good 40 years later, and some things not so. Well, some people can't do math. 55 years later, and some things not so much. And that's the same thing with this. Form, storm, norm, perform is still pretty classic, because what'll happen is, and Stephen Covey, right? Mm-hmm. Biggest selling business book of all time, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We talked about it on the book.
Yeah, your mentor. Yep.
My mentor. He talked about dependence, independence, interdependence. We go through these 3 levels. So whatever one you want to use, basically we start off with people not knowing each other well. Then we go through an icky part that they called storming. And then the team comes up with group norms based on reality and not our preconceived expectations. And then lastly, we begin to perform. By the way, marriages go through this. Relationships with kids go through this. It's one of those things that helps you understand whatever you're dealing with in life, and it's one of the most important diagnostic tools with human beings anybody can have.
Okay, so this is all healthy, and we just need to expect this.
Not only is it healthy, if you don't expect it, you're in trouble. So I'm going to back up into love and marriage, Seth, because it's often an easier way to understand it. And because people get surprised there. As I like to joke, why do mothers cry at weddings? Because they watch their kids walking into the bandsaw of disappointed expectations, and their two happy kiddos have no idea what's about to hit them. Because both parents, both sides of the family have said this to them, what about this? And they point out some things they notice about this person their kid's in love with. And they're like, I don't know, honey, about how that's going to roll. And and the kiddos, they're like, Mom, it's not like you and Dad. We're in love. Basically what it means is I get him home, I get her home. There's the old saying, and I know a lot of times people are like, well, talking about gender differences, it's a much more complicated topic. I get it. It's just an old saying. Please send all your mail to Seth, Tower, Hurd rather than me. I'm announcing it's an old saying. I'm giving you a full trigger warning. I'm going to put boys and girls in two very different categories. Even though there's a lot of research to back this up, at the same time, it won't apply to any individual. Am I doing good?
Yeah.
With just claiming this enough. Anyway, there's an old saying, men wish their wives would never change, and wives want men to change as soon as they marry them and get them home. And the same thing happens. Mom, I don't know what's wrong. 6 months later, he's on the couch in his underwear watching ball sports with enough chips and beverages to get him through 3 games. And then her mom looks around the corner and goes, well, your dad's on the couch in his underwear with enough chips and beverages to get through 3 games. And so the mom's like, why would you ask me? It's never worked with your father. Why do you think I can give you advice that works with him? And so the surprise comes when psychologists identify the first stage of marriage as the fusing of egos. And I know I'm old, but they keep replaying it. The Calvin Klein commercial, Eternity. I don't know where I begin and you end. Well, in about 3 weeks of moving furniture in together, you discover where you begin and the other person ends. It begins with, hey, can I just bring this one thing up? Or it begins with them going, all right, dude, seriously. And then we get it. I'm calling him out. Jason Anholt, one of our ministers at church, he had waited to marry Brooklyn for 4 years. He was in love with her forever. He goes, this is the greatest. I have won the lotto, and I've never said I'm sorry so much in all my life. We said, dude, get used to it. You will apologize for the rest of your life. But yes, there's highly concentrated apologizing in the first 6 months of living together. And because we have this, we don't know what we're getting into. We're in the forming of whatever new team, whatever new relationship. We're in the forming stage.
Okay. By the way, I will say I was 30, so it might be different, but I just didn't go. That's not my reality, I guess.
Well, yes, but if we had time, we go back through the fact you've been engaged before. Yeah. You had seen some of that stuff in graphic detail to the point you were like, I'm just not going to date.
Yeah.
You're in such a different case. When you met Amanda, you're like, I just had a person say to me this morning, every love relationship has been hard. I had to work at it. The one I'm in now is easy. I don't know. I wake up every day and go, how did I deserve this? Because when you go from hard to easy, you're like, all right, this is the one because this is easy.
Yeah. I mean, not that it matters for the purpose of businesses, but I was engaged for 2 weeks when I was 24 and didn't date anybody for 4 years after that. Because honestly, because I thought I dishonored my family so badly, which was a little bit silly. I was in a pretty dark place, man. I was in a pretty dark place.
Well, you had already gone to the bottom, so you'd already experienced that disappointment and disillusionment, and so that really is a different case in the research where people who and I was telling this woman, I said, your first marriage was so disappointing. You worked really hard at it, and his first marriage was disappointing. And so when people who've been disappointed find somebody else who works at marriage as hard as they do, it's so easy comparatively and they walled themselves off from the thought that maybe that's how that could be, that's too idealistic. So you were in a whole different category. And the same thing happens. The same thing happens in business. This is why this is such a great metaphor. It's just human beings.
Yeah.
You'll get somebody who's been on 3 teams that suck, and then they get a team that either clicks by accident or clicks by good chemistry, or more often has people who have they're just better experienced at what to do with teams. Some people know instinctively, but most people have to learn. They were either on sports teams that had good coaching or that had a good captain, had some good mature leadership that trained them on. Like professional sports teams are always saying, he's old, but we want him for his leadership. Basically what they're saying is they need to teach our star players how to lead a team to win, because the leadership matters as much as their speed off the hike, football fans. And so same thing happens here. You get a team of people who know how to lead through, regardless of if they're the team leader or not. And you got a team, you're like, this is easy. Everything is easy. It's easy. And you watch people in great cultures go, you go into meetings, the list is ready. It's all ready to go. We have a short meeting. We get a lot done. And I walk out stunned going, how did I get so lucky? Exact same thing that happens in marriage. I'm talking about the folks that are stunned, dismayed, disappointed because their team is stuck and they're not sure why and they're not sure what to do with it. And so the big temptation is to disengage. I call it flipping switches. They just start disengaging. They just start shutting the switches down on the engine, one engine at a time, because that's all they can do to cope with how dismayed they are that it is that it's harder than they thought.
Okay, I would actually say, although I didn't quite experience it on the the marriage example, the work example in particular, a couple of jobs I've been in, and that I can think of that I really thought I was going to get something done, and we talk about teams being stuck. There's nothing that makes me sadder looking back on my career than, the mediocre moments, like, the things that were really bad, like when I had a really terrible boss who, without a doubt had some mental illness and I think has since been through treatment for that and is probably a fine boss now, right? I look at that and I go, okay, that person was utterly insane, did things I probably could have sued over, but I really know now how bad careless actions can hurt employees, and that's important. Okay. So in a way, that's really valuable to me because I'm a better person because of it.
I'm writing another one down. We both work for mentally ill bosses.
Actually, yes, that's a good one. A couple of times when I spent a year or two somewhere and didn't feel like anything, like there was any real, like, I got a couple things done, but I didn't feel like there was one big thing I pushed through. Right. That makes me really sad. Makes me sadder than just.
We're not changing topics. This is
yes.
Dead on to what you just said. Everybody on the HR and people space, kind of the world I come out of, everybody in the HR and people space, consulting, training, measurement, whatever it is on the people side of business, engagement is the buzzword. And it has been for 10 years. What's your engagement score? What's your engagement? You know that people who are engaged are 3 times more productive, et cetera. All that's true. But there's a little known study that was published in Harvard Business Review about 6 years ago where they said, of all the factors for engagement, and there are a lot of them, the one we isolated that matters most is productivity. If you work in a horrible place but feel like you get stuff done every day that matters, you're more engaged in your job than people who work in an amazing culture that wins 100 best places to work in Fortune magazine, but you don't feel like you get anything done because of your team and your boss. Is that not crazy?
Wow.
That I can work in the absolute best place, but to use the classic, if I feel like I scoop a pile of hay and move it over to the other side of the hayloft and then back every day, useless work, I am less engaged, because that's all I can do to cope, than if I work in a bad culture where I get a bunch done. So a good team in a bad culture beats a lame team, not even a bad team, but a lame team that's listing sideways like a boat without a rudder. Even a great culture with a lame team makes me more disengaged. So Seth, you just nailed it. And I had a person who had some mental illness, and so I just never felt like I got stuff done because it was too much time with all that stuff.
Yeah. So we've set up the problem really well. Let's start getting into some solutions here.
I think the most important solution for people is, and for you bullet point people, you're gonna be a little frustrated. Some of you bullet point people are going to mistakenly, I'm just gonna be in your grill here, mistakenly go, well, I need a list of 7 steps to solve it.
Hang on.
7 steps to solve human beings. I would not do podcasts. I would be on a beach with a cabana because my wife hates being in direct sun. That we didn't discover until after marriage. I'd have a cabana, and I'd be outside of it. She'd be inside of it. And we'd be talking to each other like we're in different rooms at home. It's pathetic, but true. And we wouldn't be doing this. The fact is, what you need most is a diagnostic tool. You go to the doctor, and if your doctor can't figure out what's wrong, you don't want them cutting you open. So many people who are action-oriented do that. I just need to know where to cut. No. You need to know what's wrong first. So
can I get in right there?
Diagnostic sound theoretical to people who are truly action-oriented, full speed ahead folks.
So we got a couple things there. Let me first say that, this isn't a bullet point thing, because there are actually some podcasts that are really big that I think are pretty dang impractical. And we decided not to do this, where they just email a bunch of famous authors and say, come on and talk about your book. And the person that says the same 7 things. We were a few episodes in, and Hayden and I just decided we were originally going to do some of that, and we just decided not to do that. You come on and
probably change our mind again for those people who are. So whatever we say the format will be, I'm sure we'll come up with other ideas later.
No, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the person that's like, oh, well, right, blah, blah, blah. You have a book.
I will do another episode on what the show will be, and I'll write that one down too.
Okay.
Here's how we handle teamwork in crisis. Well, good, Seth. You know much more about this stuff than I do. I'm with you. Go. We agree.
Okay. Just full confession here. One of the reasons that I think we did an episode on, read your way to career growth, right? Read and write your way to career growth. One of the reasons I think it's so important to be reading, to be doing podcasts, et cetera, is because it checks your instincts. Because my instinct is always go fast, go hard, slash and burn. If somebody's in your way, direct face-to-face confrontation. And
we called him a sturdly battler in the episode on conflict.
Well, and there are really good times to be that. Okay. It's the reason I'm, as I've had conversations with other people who've, kind of quote unquote struck out in the entrepreneurial game. If you can't sell and you're not in a partnership, it's over. Okay. If you cannot sell and you can't find a business partner, don't go do it, because there's not going to be any money. So the thing that has been the best for my company for year 1 and probably 2, 3, and 4, as we grow to having, we go from having freelancers to full-time people. And I don't know whether or not I'll eventually grow into a traditional office setting or not. But that is also what made my company go fast and well in the small stage. Once we get sort of to that small medium stage, is what's going to grind it to a halt, because I'm pretty sure that I can, especially as a boss, I can train rec teams. I definitely can. I can go in there and hurt feelings, and all of a sudden it's not working as well.
If you'll combine the episode on conflict styles and how to make conflict work with what we're talking about here, you really will be, when it comes to reading and podcasts, you really will be halfway through a half-day workshop on how to move teams through conflict. Because what you just described about yourself as a sturdy battler, as a person that's charge ahead, it works in some situations, doesn't work in others as well. That's critical to know to make teams work, about yourself and about other people. And that's critical in the third phase.
Mm-hmm.
First phase is forming. You don't know that much about each other. In marriage, you don't know much about each other. I knew my wife was fair-skinned, and the thing for her, I think that she appreciated most about me early on in the shallow days, is I said to her, I don't know what it is, ever since I've been little, I've always thought women with a lot of freckles are especially attractive. She said, I've always thought freckles were going to make me ugly and unmarriable. I said, isn't it great that people like different things? And so I knew that she was fair-skinned and that she never tanned. She just burned and then had darker freckles. So I knew that about her. I did not understand the cabana implications. I didn't know that. Nor did I understand that for her, sitting in a chair, listening to the ocean out of doors with no air conditioning, reading a book, was as close to fingernails on a blackboard after 3 hours as anything. So the idea for her of going on a beach vacation, which for me would be pretty much wonderful for like 3 or 4 days. So when I'm done with work, give me 4 days to do nothing, and then we can go see stuff. She's good for about half a day, and she's like, are you done that? Are you ready to go do stuff? Because she would consider going to an outlet mall and walking around doing stuff, and I would consider that worthy of pulling my eyeballs out and juggling. And so, that should have been a trigger thing for people who don't like more violent metaphors. And so I didn't know that about her. You don't discover those things and you get into it. And then that leads to what the classic thing was. You get in the form stage where you're learning stuff. You get into I'm learning a long list of things I'm not happy about, and that becomes the storming stage. There's pre-storming, storming, and then we begin to norm. And so my wife and I have created norms. The norms are going to the beach with her, which I like, is a $75 to $200 thing because there has to be a cabana. She prefers the $200 cabanas because that usually comes with a cabana boy or girl who will check on her and bring her very expensive Coca-Colas and snacks of the day. She thinks nothing is better than snapping her fingers and having somebody come and ordering a sandwich. I think it's crazy to pay that much money when we can bring it in a tote. But
you know what? Amanda,
that is the beach experience.
About movie previews, because she was like, you would rather miss the previews and sneak in a drink from the gas station. And I'm like, exactly. Yes. And she's like, why? I'm like, well, because movie previews have no inherent value. I can watch them on YouTube for free. However, I don't like paying $4 or $6 for a bottle of water. And she's exactly the opposite. She's like, well, those previews are like curated to you because you're that movie. So how are you going to find out what other movies you like? And I just consume a lot more information than most people. You recently said your third child, Max, probably listens to 20 hours of podcasts a week. I mean, I'm definitely there, probably about 20 hours. I watch a little bit of TV. I play a little bit of video games. I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I will listen to a 2.5 hour podcast. It's a breakdown and a comparison of the Oceans series. Now that Oceans 8 is out. So I just have a lot more ideas of what movies are coming out. Amanda prefers to have them served up on a big screen in a dark room before the actual feature. So yes, I get it.
Did you know this before you married and moved furniture in together?
No, I definitely did not.
And so what happens is we end up storming about that. Now, in a great relationship, you storm quietly, because we got married very young, 22. Even though we dated for 3.5 years, we still got married very young. And I was not particularly good at conflict, and I was not particularly good at being a husband. We stormed bigger than was necessary. You were just smarter, wiser, and probably more, despite being a sturdy battler, you were probably more innately less stupid than I was. And so it took us a while. Early on, we had a lot of storming to sort out, or norm, to use a fancy rhyming word for it, to sort out how we would do it. For example, I'm old. We both grew up in worlds where our moms did the shopping and our fathers handled the budget. My wife said to me, all right, what do we got in the bank? I said, I don't know. I'll have to sit down and figure it out. She goes, I'll do it. So she went and got the checkbook and said, what's this? Oh, I said, the check registry. I said, oh, I know. Some of you are like, check registry, what's that? There was a time when they gave you this white booklet where you would write everything down like a list of accounts on paper, and it wasn't all done electronically online. Oh,
and I think we discussed that on a previous episode. I don't have a checkbook for my business or for our personal account. We don't have business or checking or personal checking accounts. In the rare occasion we actually need a check, we go get it as a cashier's check because it just seems silly to have a checkbook when you write 8 checks a year.
Yeah, and no, I I understand fully and completely how you would look at the world that way. And yeah, so we did that, and I would keep different budget items in the check registry. You know, I was single man. I had like 5 budget items. I'd track them right there, code them. She goes, "This is impossible. What's all this mean?" I said, "Well, that's the total for how much I've done in this category." She's like, "Hand it to me." I said, "Well, I'm not going to add this burden to you." She said, "Oh, it's not a burden. I know neither of our families do it this way, but I will be taking the checkbook because you suck." This is not how people do it. I said, "As long as you round up to the nearest $10, it all washes out." She goes, No, we will round to the penny." And so she is, even though it was different than the norms in both of our families, we had, like, every couple had to make a norm for us. Same process happens in business teams. You start forming, you don't know really what you're going to get. You begin to discover things you don't like. And often, this is the most important, the traditional roles you were all brought onto the team for. You're the engineer, you're the tech guy, you're the graphics guy, you're the marketing person. They all come with a package of things you're supposed to be good at. You're supposed to be the creative one because you're stereotypically in marketing. Yeah. You're supposed to be the analytical one because you're in engineering or finance. And then you discover that actually, when it comes to leading the meeting, the person who's responsible for the team, the manager, the champion, the project leader, they're not the best at meetings. And actually, the finance person is better at leading meetings than the project manager is. And everybody gets frustrated because the finance person is like, "These meetings are killing me, Smalls. I could do this and this and this." And then they start a sub-team that goes to lunch and talks about how frustrated they are with how the meeting's going, and the team splinters into sub-teams. This is what, in this wonderful company I was working with this week, the lights went on and they went, "Oh, we sub-team all the time." But because there's such a great committed culture, people sub-team into 2 different teams. The people who do the work and the people who are boxed out from the work because they're not producing at the same level and it doesn't feel fair. And instead of they go and smash their heads into filing cabinets like you said, Seth, but they cope with fairness by just going, "We're the A team, you're the people in the way," and they form 2 different teams and then resent them.
You know what? And I've totally been there, and I don't actually know exactly where you're going to go. You know, you said the diagnostic tool. I don't know how this issue gets resolved. I really don't, because I've been there, and that's what I usually did was like, you know, first of all, I would call it out publicly. I would say there are 14 people in this meeting. It went for 2 hours. Here's what it costs the company, virtually a week's worth of work in wages.
Now, your group of people who are absolutely appalled by the meeting go and chat with each other, because we all talk in code. Here's what we do about it, Seth. You talk in code. Mm-hmm. Meetings are coded conversations between body language and how we say things. You can tell when a team is storming in 3 ways. You can watch the eye movements, and you can watch people look at each other. You're scanning the room, and you're seeing other people looking down and doodling, and you're seeing this little line compress between their eyebrows, and you're like, "They're hating this too. They think this is crazy too." And you kind of bump into each other next time. You're like, "Well, that meeting didn't get much done." And they're like, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not the only one." Well, they knew they weren't the only one because they could see your face. And as a sturdy battler, Seth has no poker face. When he wants to either pull his eyes out or pull your head off, he doesn't not show it well in a meeting. He gives all kinds of distracted, frustrated body language things. And so they can see it. You 2 shifts passing in the night, you bring it up, and suddenly you're like, "I know, me too. What are we going to do about it?" And then when you try stuff and realize it's not working, you begin to kind of be the team that commiserates about how bad it is. And you begin to say things like, "If I were leading this meeting, here's what I would do." And now, once again, you weren't a bad person.
Yeah.
They're not a bad person. The vast majority of people on teams aren't bad people. We get into this vortex of storming, and there is not, in most companies, most marriages, most teenage years, there is not a clear path for how to get out. Now, I know I said there are no 7 steps, but there really is some things you have to do. You got to do them in different ways in different cultures and different families, but there really are some clear things you have to do. Because as John Gottman points out, Unhappy families are the same. Unhappy teams are really all the same. How you get out of it depends on the team, but you got to go through the same stuff. You got to do the same things. That's why this diagnostic is so helpful. It helps people go to what you said earlier. This is going to happen. I'm going to hit this. And sub-teaming isn't even bad, because sub-teaming is the bubbling stage of storming. Bubbling. Now, here's where it goes wrong. If I won't bring it up and deal with it, we will go to what one of the great books, The Wisdom of Teams, calls pseudo teams. A team that never gets past what they called the trough, right? You're going over a waterfall, you go down into a trough, and then you never come back out again. And that was their metaphor for the stages teams go through. So you go down this waterfall, when you're whitewater rafting, you get stuck in this trough and you just stay there drowning. And some teams call themselves teams, but they're actually pseudo teams because they have all the liabilities of the team, but never the benefit. Meetings take forever. Nothing ever gets done. The liabilities of the team, but they get none of the benefits of great ideas, faster moving, higher productivity. And the only way to get through that is to say, I don't think these meetings get much done. And then watch the person leading the meeting turn completely red. Now, you've talked to the person leading the meeting 2 or 3 times, and they've said, yeah, that's a great idea. And then they've never changed anything because they don't think they're doing as badly as you do. Or they wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah, you just shut me up.
And so you've talked to them 2 or 3 times on the side because you're not a jerk. You're not going to throw them under the bus. And the time comes when you've done all the work you need to do. And it's literally 3 different groups. In a meeting of 14, there would be, in a team of 14, which is too big of a team, but in a team of 14, you would have 3 different subgroups by that time, all afraid to throw the first punch, to stir the pot, whatever metaphor you want to use, an analogy you want to use, because they'll get blamed for being the person that caused the conflict. We all know it's gurgling underneath, but the person that throws the first punch is considered out of line. You're out of line. What did you do that for? Now we're never going to get anything done. Like we were getting anything done before? Are you all pot smokers?
Depending on the industry, maybe.
Actually, that is funny. I thought after I said it, I should have been a trigger for those people who are all in support of it being legalized. Sorry. I don't want to trigger you either.
That millennial episode next, but
yeah,
but you have the big moment. You call it out. Where does it get better?
You're the one who's hated because everybody else is like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not emotionally prepared for this. I literally was working with a group that had a woman who was so, Seth, she was a sturdy battler, but she was mentally ill. And so she ran people over. I mean, literally ran them over. She would hover over their desk, get in their personal space over the top of them, and begin to make threats. It was so bad in that team, and the product was so critical to the company that the CEO of the company had written a letter to the head of that project team saying, if you need to fire them all and start over, I'm willing to do that, but it can't go like this. It was a 3-day session. All through the first 2 days, people would say to me, I don't want to pull you aside, but she's the problem. Here's what happens. And then we got to right after lunch on day 3, and I said, well, let me bring up something that literally everyone has brought up to me. And I named her name. Everyone on the team has told me that, let's call her Lynn, is domineering. And Lynn, I'm sorry, I brought it up with you before a couple of times, and you've said, no, that's not right. That's not true. But we just acknowledge the fact that you think it's not true, and everyone has told me in no uncertain terms that they're intimidated by you. They believe at times it's even harassment. And you're not getting the meanings or the signals. That whole group simultaneously released uric acid. Simultaneously, that whole group peed their pants. This was even better. You ready? The head of the HR representative who was there said, I don't really believe this is an appropriate place for this. You know, this is just supposed to be a workshop. We're not actually supposed to deal with real things in this. And despite the fact that senior VP said, if we need to pull out the letter as the final big bomb, then let's do that. I don't want to do it if I have to. I don't want to play the boss card, but this is the boss's boss card of the boss's boss card, that I've got a letter from the CEO. And I finally did there. I said, Pam, would you please read the letter from the CEO? Everybody got really quiet. I said, no, this was never training. This was always, this team either gets it fixed this week or you get other jobs. And then HR said, well, you know, there's some guests from our manufacturing, and I don't really think it's appropriate to pull our dirty laundry in front of them. They're like, we have problems like this all the time. What do you mean? We're glad you're finally dealing with it. One of them said, oh, we knew you guys were all messed up for a year and a half. You can't get anything done. Literally, Seth, they were so furious at me because I had brought it up. They wanted magic fairies to come down from the sky and make her stop without ever having to talk about it, deal with it, be uncomfortable, risk the fact that work was going to get a lot worse before it ever got better. And I think and it may be a good place to end this episode, because if not, you can see I can go on this for a while. The reason we don't do it is because we've all seen times when it was done, often poorly, but when it was done, and the team never recovered. It at least was less awkward to have never brought it up and always just be bubbling and churning. It was less awkward than it was once somebody brought it up and it's out on the table and the team members are too immature or unskilled to know, emotionally immature or unskilled to do anything with it. And then the team is just like frozen there in this team limbo. No, I'm sorry. Purgatory is where you pay for your sins. Limbo is a state of grace. They're not oblivious to it. They're in a team purgatory for as long as that thing goes, realizing that it's ineffective, realizing that there's 3 sub-teams because it's now on the table, and simply incapable of dealing with it. That is what we're afraid of. We're afraid of the misery of having the elephant on the table in every meeting with a group with no capability to train them or to tame them. Wow. Okay. So we won't deal with it. Human nature is, and a lot of very expensive paid people went, yeah, it is not in our culture to bring that up when we hit that point. Said, and you're one of the most respected cultures in all of the world of business. Somebody from one of the HR people said, well, human nature being what it is, I said precisely, human nature being what it is, we would rather be miserable than take the chance we will be in purgatory.
So let me say this again, just as we wrap this episode up. So where you get stuck is the storming, the conflict, and then you get through that, normalize, and then you crush it. And on the outside, people just say, oh man, what happened to, Apple really tanked on the iPhone X, right? What happened? What happened to their magic? What happened to the special sauce that was always making Apple win year after year? That's all that the outside sees. That's maybe all that the customer sees. Like, oh, they just don't have it anymore. What probably happened was during a key decision in your product or your service, getting to market, you got hung up here and nobody would say it.
Sir, knowing Apple, well, first of all, there is an X on my counter. I came home to an X because that's what my daughter asked for her birthday. And she's still in the family plan. So what's interesting is the X started slowly, and it's now beginning to get some momentum behind it. So we'll see. My guess is Apple had some real hand-to-hand combat over whether or not they were going to respond to the jibes that they're always too far out ahead and screw up phones. And Apple tends to say, I'd rather have people mad at us on this one and be ready for virtual reality than I would do the Samsung route and keep the headphone mic, but have some limitations on what you can put in the thing because of the space that takes. So Apple is almost always willing to make future trade-offs for past trade-offs, and Samsung's often not willing to do that, which is why, frankly, I have a Samsung. And so who knows, that may be a decision where they argue. I have no doubt they argued over it back and forth for a long time and made the call. Now, who knows, it may have been Tim Cook going, screw you all, I'm in charge. But knowing what people say about Tim Cook behind his back, I'd be very surprised if that's what happened. But, but that's a great case study, actually, Seth, in terms of what could roll. But you know what it very well could have. They could have had, and they've had some new leadership. They could have had some new leadership. They could have got stuck at a stage, and that be the product of it. It could be brilliant strategically. It could be a really dumb decision, or it could be a product of getting stuck. I think that's a real good set of hypotheses on that.
Okay, and now, let me say this.
Yeah.
So you identified where it got stuck. You identified the pain. We talked about some teams never recover. Did we say how to recover and keep moving?
Yeah, here we go. You ready? I think we really should do the next episode on this, even though we were going to do something else, so we can go in more detail. But for those of you who are like, seriously, what if I missed the next episode? What if I'm in the hospital? What if my iPhone X doesn't work anymore because it has to use a completely stupid way of listening to sound? But anyway. What if you do it, Seth, in his little iPhone world? What do you do if that's the case? You have got to put your big boy pants or your big girl pants on and get out of child mode and get into adult mode. Transactional analysis said it this way. We tend to roll in three ways as we interact with each other, as we transact with each other emotionally. We can be a parent. Now, Seth, here's what you need to know. Or you can be a child. Oh, please don't hurt me. Oh, please don't hurt me. Or I don't know what I can do. I'm helpless in here. And the leaders are responsible for fixing things in our organization because I'm not getting the training I need because the leaders won't do it. My company sucks. That's child mode. And then we move to adult mode. And couples, I just want you to watch how many times one of you talks like a parent to the, hey, why are you acting like this? Why do you do this? Why do you spend money like this? Why don't you put the toilet seat down? Honey, why are you always on my back? Why are you always yelling at me? Why can't you be more supportive? How many marital dynamics are parent-child? We just flip from depending on the issue, who's the parent, who's the child. Adult to adult is a problem-solving. It's going to be uncomfortable. Talking about problems is never fun, but adults talk about problems without making it either. I just want you to know you suck so badly. But a lot of times, Seth, we wait so long and we're so frustrated and we're so churned up inside that it doesn't just come out, it blows. The whole pot of chili hits the ceiling because we waited so long. It's been bubbling so long. And when somebody can't take it anymore, how often are we rational enough when we can't take it anymore to handle conflict in any way? Or it's worse, but most people give their boss feedback when they can't take it anymore. It's been churning for so long, it comes out so acidic that their boss doesn't think they receive feedback. Their boss thinks they've been dumped on. And so it had no hope. Well, I tried what you said, Hayden. I brought it up. I dealt with it like an adult. No, you dealt with it like a child who then went into parent mode. I'm so hurt, so upset that you're in charge and you've not fixed this, that I want to tell you, you are ridiculous. You are horrible. I am in such pain because you're inept. As if the other person was going to go, oh, thank you, almighty parent, subordinate of mine. Thank you for spewing all of your internal churning onto me all at once with stuff we should have talked about for years. But thank you. It's such a gift. If you end up in purgatory, it's because you froze it there. It's a bad Doctor Who episode. If we do it like an adult, we bring it up earlier. Hey, I'm really frustrated with these meetings. And after you've talked to the person leading the meeting 3 times, you bring it up to the group. Not when you're angry, but when you're calm. Hey, I'm sorry. Instead of me doodling here and being passive aggressive, I just need to say, I feel like we get less done for the time I invest in this than we need to and that we could. And I know I'm probably going to hurt some people's feelings and make some people mad and kind of be the jerk of the hour.
That's it. Okay. So you just got to go in like that.
I'm an adult, and I give you in the meeting the chance to be an adult too. And if they don't act like an adult, then we figure out what our next move is. But I stay in adult mode rather than child or parent mode and let other people make their choices around me.
He's Hayden Shaw. You can find out more about what he does at peopledrivenresults.com. Go there, check out his free video series. Unemployment is so low. You don't want to be losing good people right now. peopledrivenresults.com. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. You can find out more about what I do at digitalprofitfarm.com. One of the things that people are really hitting me up about a lot in 2018 is how to get a podcast going that reaches thousands of people and helps you sell more stuff. And my company's doing more of that actually every month. You can find out more at digitalprofitfarm.com. Would love to talk to you more about how to get going there, and also throw you some free videos of advice on what I did to get all the podcasts I'm involved in up to about 70,000 downloads a month. We are the Consultant and the Millennial, and I think this conversation continues on the next episode. That's it.